This is a pivotal year for India-China power dynamics. Ever since 1949, India has agreed to the One China policy. Neither China's invasion in 1962, neither India-China Doklam standoff in 2017 saw India abandon this policy. Not even CCP-initiated projects in Pakistan-occupied territory changed India's official position on this issue, but the 2020 Galwan Valley clashes and the resulting loss of lives have had a major impact. Is India finally rethinking its official position? China hopes to isolate Taiwan using this diktat, but post-2020, India-Taiwan ties have soared to greater heights. Just a few days ago, India and Taiwan inked a new migration and mobility pact aimed at helping Taipei meet its development goals and in turn stand up against its larger bully. While India has not officially abandoned Beijing's policy, let's find out why this new pact with Taiwan seems to have shaken the very foundations of this One China policy in New Delhi. India-Taiwan bilateral relations started way back in the earlier 20th century. Since then, it has gone through many ups and downs, but recently, a positive force has been driving this bilateral relationship to even greater heights. Now, both the countries signed an MOU according to which Indian workers will help Taiwan drive its economy forward, in turn helping Taipei to be better prepared to face any external threats from bullying neighbors. Yes, cue China. India and Taiwan on February 16, 2024 signed a Memorandum of Understanding on migration and mobility that will facilitate the employment of Indian workers in diverse sectors on the island nation, currently facing a shortage of workers in areas such as manufacturing, construction and agriculture. The MOU was signed at a virtual ceremony by the Director General of the India-Taipei Association, M.A. Yadav, and B. Gur, the head of the Taipei Economic and Cultural Center in New Delhi. According to the pact, Taiwan will decide the industries and number of Indian migrant workers to be allowed to work in their country, and the Indian side will recruit, train all these workers to go and work in Taiwan and help them meet their needs. Before this, the majority of foreign workers in Taiwan came from Vietnam, Indonesia, the Philippines and Thailand, fellow Southeast Asian nations. Taiwan is affected by an aging population and a low birth rate, and that is why it is looking at migrant labor force. According to the Taiwanese Labor Ministry, impact on India-China ties is bound to happen. While it is great that India is helping Taiwan, the elephant in the room, or shall I say the dragon in the room, is China. Xi Jinping has been very vocal, saying China is prepared to use force to capture Taiwan. The CCP does not see Taiwan as an independent nation. They want to wipe out the country Taiwan, the country named Taiwan, off the face of the world map. While India's relationship with Taiwan is rising, it will impact and worry the power brokers sitting in Beijing. This is because by helping Taiwan, India in a way is shunning the so-called One China policy. This One China policy has been used by China in the past to capture Tibet and Hong Kong, and now China wants the world to look away and break all ties with Taiwan. In the past, India recognized Tibet as part of China and stayed away from the Hong Kong issue. But New Delhi soon realized that this was a one-way street. China went ahead and built road and rail networks in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, thus violating India's sovereignty. While Xi Jinping wants India to accept the One China policy, China has no qualms about disrespecting India's territorial integrity. China continues to claim and occupy Indian territories of Ladakh. Yes, I'm talking about Aksai Chin. Beijing also has its sights set on the Indian territory in Arunachal Pradesh, which CCP conveniently calls Lower Tibet. CCP also continues to shield Pakistan-based and India-focused terrorists from UN sanctions. It has consistently maintained steadfast silence over Pakistan's support of terrorism and anti-India activities, just so China can keep India's progress in check. China is also arming Pakistan to use it as a puppet against India. India has no reason to respect this authoritarian One China policy, and now New Delhi has decided to support fellow democratic nation of Taiwan. India is the world's fourth largest military power and soon to become the third biggest global economy. India has the might and the willpower to stand up to China. But not all nations can say the same. Beijing has often used this so-called One China policy to isolate Taiwan from international platforms, be it the global health bodies during the COVID pandemic or bilateral and geopolitical alliances with fellow Indo Pacific nations. Let's take a closer look at what exactly is this One China policy. and what has been India's official stance on the One China policy in the past. The One China policy is the diplomatic recognition by other countries of China's position that there is only one Chinese government, and that is the People's Republic of China, though Taiwan, which calls itself the Republic of China, has been governed independently of the PRC since 1949, so it's been very long. Beijing asserts that there is only one China and that Taiwan is part of it. It views the PRC as the only legitimate government of China, an approach it calls the One China principle, and seeks Taiwan's eventual unification with the mainland. Xi Jinping, who has assumed the role of lifelong president, or as Joe Biden calls him, a dictator, has made it his life's mission to, quote, reunify Taiwan. Xi Jinping has been quoted saying that China will never rule out the use of force. In other words, CCP is prepared to use force to claim Taiwan. A democratic nation that has been self-sufficient and self-reliant just off the coast of China gives CCP leadership sleepless nights. China often uses its economic clout and debt trap policies to bully smaller nations to cut ties with Taipei, and there have been various examples. CCP mouthpiece Global Times boasted how it bullied 8 countries to break ties with Taiwan during former President Tsai Ing-wen's tenure, and that is not isolated. It included a tiny Micronesian nation like Nauru, which would be hard to spot on a world map, but China has been bullying it. Taiwan accused Beijing of buying over this nation. And Nauru is not alone. There have been other examples. Just take a look at Honduras, which also could not resist Chinese pressure tactics. Now here is another example. China's arm twisting of Guatemala in the name of trade relationship to break ties with Taipei. So clearly China enjoys bullying smaller nations and is prepared to use its economic and military clout to isolate Taiwan on the global stage. But such tactics do not appear to be working in 21st century India. India-Taiwan trade is booming, Taiwanese companies are investing heavily in India, and New Delhi has now signed a pact to help Taiwan meet its neighbor goals and thus give a push to its economy. But what has been India's stand on the One China policy in the past? Has India accepted this policy under previous governments in its history? Let's take a closer look. India's stand on the One China policy. The One China policy was first accepted by India in 1949, when it agreed to the Chinese precondition for establishing diplomatic relations between the two countries. Now back then, New Delhi viewed China as a fellow Asian nation trying to emerge from imperialistic control. New Delhi was keen to strengthen ties with its neighbor. At the time, the move was seen as a way for India to forge new alliances post-independence and demonstrate its commitment to anti-colonialism. India had been under colonial rule for centuries, and this seemed like a normal course of action. The British had just partitioned India to smaller nations, and by backing the One China policy, it was New Delhi's way of supporting the notion of self-determination and opposition to the partition of a country by an oppressing force, in this case China. Now, this policy has been the cornerstone of India's foreign policy towards China for several decades, but in recent years, there have been calls to revisit this policy in light of changing geopolitical dynamics, especially since China went ahead with its projects in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir or POK and violated India's sovereignty. Since the turn of the century, Beijing is also actively working against Indian interests in Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Maldives, and even Nepal. The 2020 Galwan Valley clashes and Chinese failed attempts to capture more territory along the LAC seem to have been the tipping point. India now is actively boosting its ties with Taiwan, just like the United States, and in a way, undermining the One China policy. The rise of Taiwan as a major global and technological power and India's growing economic, geopolitical, and strategic ties with the United States seem to be driving force behind this calculated decision. The need for India to assert its independence and defend its interests. The total investment of Taiwanese enterprises in India exceeded $4 billion, covering areas from footwear, machinery, and automobile components to petrochemicals. Taiwan-based Foxconn, a major supplier to Apple, has established an iPhone manufacturing facility in Tamil Nadu and is planning another one in Karnataka. Indian authorities are also actively courting Taiwanese semiconductor companies to bolster India's ambitions of becoming a prominent chip manufacturing hub in Asia. Presently, around 2,700 Indian professionals are employed in Taiwan, predominantly in the high-tech sector. The bilateral trade between India and Taiwan has witnessed steady growth, surging from slightly over 1 billion in 2001 to 7.7 billion in 2021. Yet, the political relationship between India and Taiwan periodically has been complicated by issues of protocol. Earlier, Indian members of parliament travelling to Taiwan were asked by the MEA to travel on ordinary passports instead of diplomatic ones. But this changed in May 2016 when India sent 2 parliamentarians to Tsai's presidential inauguration. Taiwan is one of the most promising economies in the world and is a significant player in the global tech industry. India, like most nations, lacks formal diplomatic relations with Taiwan, relying instead on Taiwanese representative offices also functioning as de facto diplomatic missions. However, if recent trade and labor pacts are an indication, then India and Taiwan today stand closer than ever before. Have your say. If China does not respect India's sovereignty, then should New Delhi reconsider its official stand on the One China policy? Leave a comment below, and if you like this news report, then subscribe to our channel or hit the like button so that it can reach more viewers.